Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Black and Mild podcast. My name is Bree, and I'm happy to be here with you today. I'm joined with the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Right New Rules himself, Adrian Crawford. How are you doing today, Adrian?
Nice intro. I'm doing well, Bree.
Did you write that?
No. You know, if I have anybody write anything, it's you.
That's true. That's why I'm here.
All right, as Adrian always says, we are joined by our illustrious co-host, Irish O'Fell.
I know he wrote that part.
Today?
I'm good, Bree. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Well, before we get started, if you are listening to the podcast and have gathered any value from Black and Mild, we would love for you to leave a review. We love to hear what the people think, but only if you're trying to give us the full 5 stars.
Yes, we do not want 1 stars here at all. You know what I'm saying? So, but we are excited today. We are excited, guys, because we're going to jump right in. You guys know we normally do air it out, but we're going to jump right into it today because we are joined by one of my favorite people on the planet. Somebody I've known, gosh, it's crazy, 25 years now. I know. No, 25 years. I was playing here at Florida State, and my first year here as a redshirt was her first year here.
What's crazy is if you look at your before and after,
dude,
it's obvious the 25 years. Coach Sue looks like she just walked in the door.
She does. I mean, gosh, it's like, man, it's fine wine, Coach Sue. You aged
well.
You aged well. No. But we are joined by head coach of Florida State women's basketball, Coach Sue. And Coach Sue, again, she is truly someone I think is really an icon in college women's basketball because she built the program. I mean, for a program that was literally down and out to over the last 25 years has built a national powerhouse. And so, Coach Sue, we really appreciate you being here today.
Adrian, I remember the first time I saw you. So really? I came down from my office at the Moore Center, and we had that little tiny gym at the Moore Center. Dude. And I was like, who is in the gym? And it was you and probably Terrell Baker. Yes. And you guys had a boom box. There was nothing else back then, but you guys had a boom box. It was late at night and you were in putting up shots. And I'm just like, man, this guy's dedicated. Find out you're a coach's kid. So hey.
That's what we used to, it's funny. I tell people, who like, how'd you guys get in there late at night? It's like, it's not the technology you have up here. You get the thumbprint, whatever. Dude, we used to have to go to Moore Center and it had a magnet. The doors were locked and we just figured out if you yank it really hard, then they were open. So literally we would come here at night and I'll never forget. We would go in there and work out. So Terrell Baker, friend of mine, still live here in Tallahassee from Camden, New Jersey. We would go in the gym. So we just want to work out.
You guys had to break into your own gym?
Yes. Listen.
Or we went ahead and we just put something in the outside door.
Yes. Outside door that we do. So we would go in, and here's what would happen. Like Bake, it was never like, we're going to go in there and work out, right? So we go in, we're ready to work, but Bake would go over there and turn the heat up. So it's like he would turn up to like 85 degrees in the gym. And then, just dudes from New York, New Jersey are different. Then he's want to play one-on-one full court. And he's one of the best on-ball defenders I've ever been around. So he's picking me up. Listen, we're in the summer. He's picking me up full court at like 2 a.m. at night. I was like, this is awful. Like, you know what I'm saying? And so, but no, it was.
Well, that was back in the day when you could turn the heat up because now we got to call over to the central office in order to get this temperature adjusted.
Hey, let me tell you, it was back in the day. It was back in the day where, man, it was a little bit of the wild, wild west. You know what I'm saying? Budget wise and everything.
Adrian likes to tell us that this is the house he built.
What? Wait, who said what? Really? I never said. Listen, I tell people when I was here, it's like in the Bible, it was like John the Baptist. Like we had the dark years preparing the way for new bloods. You know what I'm saying? And so, but Coach, we are excited you're here. And again, really jumping right into it, Coach. In the midst of COVID, all this crazy stuff, you decided to take a sabbatical. I mean, you decided to, in the midst of all this stuff going on, being at it for such a long period of time. And I know there's multiple reasons why. First thing I would say, how are you feeling and how are you doing now that you've come back? And then 2, like, why did you decide to do that?
Well, it feels great to be back. Yeah, I think it's almost like COVID didn't exist here because I wasn't here. And I think about what everybody had to go through here, and I'm absolutely amazed at how hard it was and how well we did through it, and that we are so far beyond the type of, that I don't know, what do you call it, guys?
Yeah.
I mean, and so that was that it's odd, in a way that everybody went through that, and I wasn't here with them to do that. Really tough decision. Went back and forth a lot, and I went to to Seattle, and my mom had been diagnosed with ovarian cancer, and she went through the surgery, and then they said, well, we really need to do this chemo to make sure that we got everything. Well, we didn't know it was COVID. Could she do that? She was, immune system is down, and so she had the doctor say, okay, what happens if I die of COVID? What does that feel like? And what does it feel like if I die of cancer? And she said, I think I'd rather die of COVID. So let's do this chemo. And so it was so hard being, corner to corner. I mean, Seattle to Tallahassee's corner to corner. And, knowing that you had to quarantine on both ends and knowing I couldn't put my 100% into either one. Florida State graciously allowed me to step away for a year and, give Brooke that opportunity that she did so well with. And I not a lot of people get that opportunity. Florida State allowed her that. And really, I think is going to springboard her into her career at a higher level.
Were you part of I guess part of the concern would have been if you did travel to go see her, you would have to quarantine every time before you could even be around her. So that would have, it just would have made it almost impossible.
And our team, I would have had to quarantine back here. And that made it the thing that, how do I do that?
Right.
So it was before the rapid testing and all of those different things that came out. But, even so, I'm leaving for Seattle next week to go back and spend some more time with my mom and dad. And even so, Seattle hasn't opened up yet.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
It's weird. Wherever you live, however things are at that time, it's kind of how you feel like everybody is dealing with it. But it's much for a lot of this time. It was much different.
It's always interesting. It's like I tell people I'm a really big like states' rights person, But then also but then in moments like this where I'm like, nah, I wish we all just be on the same page. You know what I'm saying? Because when you say Florida, it's the Wild West. You're going up to there. It's like it's like straight like lockdown, like COVID is. You know what I mean? So it's like, and then you're just like, man, sometimes I wish there could just be a general thing, because I think that's what causes a lot of attention in our country. Where if you really look at it even now, you have the biggest migration of people coming to Florida or going to Texas, and it's because of people having. Again, you can go in their tax laws, so also even the COVID thing. So it's really, really interesting. And that's why I tell people COVID has shifted our nation to where we don't know what this is going to look like, because again, you're talking about just all the stuff. And so I know that must have been really hard.
Well, it's interesting too, because I felt like for the first time I saw state to state differences. People can talk about it, but it was very real. And then I came back thinking, okay, this department is like, this is a state. Men's basketball is a state. Soccer's a state.
Wow.
And we all had to function on our own and create different situations, scenarios, borders, all of that type of stuff. So it was really interesting to compare the two.
Wow.
Yeah, Coach, so I can imagine there are a lot of girls coming here ready to play basketball and not prepared for it to look the way it did at all. So once those changes started to get made and you knew you were going to have to take a sabbatical, how did you prepare them?
They were great. I spoke with all of them individually. I spoke with their parents individually. I got on Zoom calls with them. And as soon as they respected the decision. And honestly, it's been a part of our program since the first day I got here, is that every decision we make is about the fact that you're a person first. Wow. And so if I'm going to preach that for 23 years, then how am I going to not make this decision? And that's what I think it was set up. So this decision was already made, and they were fantastic. And then really just stepping away and making sure that they looked at Brooke and said, that's my head coach. And I didn't jump in the middle trying to, where is this going? So she did a fantastic job with that.
Yeah, wow.
Coach, I think, knowing you over the years, the one thing that you've always, I think part of your leadership has been, I think you've made you good leaders because you've actually approached the work, not so much as a coach, but really, honestly, I see as a mom, to where you're this mom where you have to lead them, but then there's such this loving, in a good way, nurturing, but also really hard when you have to be. Brooke was one of your players. She really is like a daughter to you. So I want to know now, again, I know you're going to give, but here in the Black and Mild, we have authentic conversation. So here's what I know. What was the anxiety like watching your daughter at home?
I like to call her a sister now. Come on now.
All right. Well, watching a sister or someone who you love dearly, someone who you've helped, bring up, help her with her career, all this stuff. Emotionally and everything, what was that like sitting at home trying to do that?
And knowing that I'm not a mom who gets to watch their child perform, and you guys understand that with your kids, and it was probably what you feel. It was, I wanted the best for her. I wanted her to make the best decisions. I wanted the players to play hard for her. It was just, I wanted to be the first one to talk to her afterward to make sure she was thinking the right things, you're like, no, parents, let the coaches talk. But yeah, it was, the joy in the first game when we beat Florida.
Yeah.
That I couldn't stand it. I called immediately after that game and just was so excited for them. And, again, what a fantastic job.
Yeah. And let me add real quick. I want to add to that though, is that, so when you're doing, so what has it taught you though, now that you've been outside, as now, you're watching, like, in a sense, like we said, we're sister, child, like coach and things like, has it given you has it changed your perspective or given more empathy or whatever toward parents? Because, now when that you've had to sit there and sitting there where you can't, you want the best, but you can't do anything. All you can do is just hopefully will them on at home yelling at your TV or something like that. So has it given you a different perspective?
That's a great question, because my parents were sitting in the room as well. So, I would say, attack, attack, attack. And my mom would be over here like, no, what do you mean by that? Attack, attack, attack. And I'm thinking, parents don't always know. Now there are some parents like you who are very astute to what it means to be a coach. And it really was, I kept going back to, I don't know what's happening at practice. And as a coach, I want to say that to parents. You don't know every day what's happening in practice. And so it settled me, a lot. But, and Brooke with her daughter Avery, she always says, I don't want to be that parent. And I think it's really hard not to be. You want the best for your child. You just don't know how to coach them up.
Parents and media and fans. Because that's the thing. That's the thing when I talk to fans all the time or other media, and a lot of times we're critical of coaches. Why didn't they play this person? Why didn't they make that decision? Well, you're not there. You don't know. You don't know what day that player had to practice yesterday. You don't know what happened in a meeting that morning. You don't know what happened the last time they ran that play for that player.
Yes.
So the coaches, that's one thing that I wish, and I try to remember as much as I can. It's hard sometimes because we get paid to give opinions, but we don't have all the information that the coaches have. Yeah. That's not to say you guys always make the right decisions, but you don't have all the information.
What? You said
that? but you got that perspective from watching.
Well, yes. And you're thinking about the future. You're not just thinking about that moment. So, for example, we've had maybe 8 practices since I've been back here in the summer. And it was fun to see the players initially. They're all excited. And then our freshmen come in the last couple of days. And today was my first big disappointing day. What was it? It was, we talked about relational value as a coaching staff afterwards. So the relational value that some player on the team gives you is so valuable.
Yeah.
It's the kid that has great body language. It's the kid that connects with their teammates, has eye contact, and the kid that doesn't can pull everybody down. And how do you put it in them that they want to be that way? They want to give rather than just pointing it out. Because you know what it's like to be a teacher.
Yeah.
You don't tell people. You don't tell them and expect them to do it. You've got to teach them. So how do we be better teachers in that way? And there's so much, in that goes into it.
Yeah. So obviously COVID was not the only thing that happened in 2020. Things were really racially charged.
Yes.
So as a white woman leading a predominantly Black sport, how did you handle that?
Well, before I left, the murder of George Floyd had happened. And so I was able to, even though we were spread, get our team together to talk about how they felt. And I've since gone through many trainings, just finished one yesterday called A Long Talk. Mm-hmm. I'm a part of a group called Coaches for Change, because as a white woman, I think it's important that I learn from the African Americans that I'm around, not just because I ask them, but I witness, and then I go out and talk to other white people. Because they're enduring it. Yeah. We have to do something about talking to our white colleagues. I remember, though, talking to Valencia Myers, and she said to me, "You know what, Coach Sue, I'm so glad I play for a white woman or for a white person." And I said, "Why is that?" And she goes, "Because if I get pulled over, I know the first person I call and is Coach Sue, and she's going to help me out of this situation." And so she was acknowledging there was some value in the fact that she was associated. And that was extremely humbling, because I'm not the one that's going to get pulled over. So, but I know I can do something about it.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And I think over the years, Coach, I guess kind of going a little bit more into that you've always had this desire, again, you've coached predominantly, Black women throughout your career. And you've always, in my years of knowing you, you've always had a desire for them. Basketball was basketball, wins, losses happen, but you always thought about them as leaders, eventually being mothers, being wives, eventually making impact. I think over the years, what are kind of some of the things that, I would say, just especially very specific to your, to your Black players, that you've tried to instill in them, over the years, where you're like, okay, I really want to try to instill this in them. Why I have them? Because, you only have them for this, this run of the race. You have them for 4 years, maybe 5. And there's some stuff, you become like a second mom to these kids. So what have been some things that you feel like you've been intentional about adding to their lives?
Well, you may disagree as a Black man, but I feel like they are the lowest of the totem pole. It goes white men.
100%. I agree. 100%.
And so, they're women.
Yeah.
And even being women of color. And that juices me to say, let's change it.
Yeah.
Let's figure out. And so many of them I talk to, and they believe that flipping the resource level and becoming somebody that has more resources can really help to change that. Wow. And so come on, let's make sure that you're ready to go out into this big bad world and make the kind of money that you think can make a change.
Wow.
So I think that's one thing. I think of Nikki Ikamu. She would have been drafted. She would have been playing professionally, WNBA right now. And her knees were bad. And she said, I just am so excited about getting my business started.
Wow.
Well, we talk constantly about that. And I think I might be her biggest fan, because it's not just about one of my players doing something. It's about Nikki and her charge to be an African-American woman who makes a change in this world.
Wow.
I've invested with a former coach that has her own business right now as an African-American woman. And she's like, look, let's get together and let's put together internships for your players where they can get in, they can see what it looks like, and then go from there. So they're ready. And I think that's huge. It's not like the men's game where all of them are going to go pro. There just aren't that many opportunities.
Yeah.
We have 21 women playing professional basketball right now.
It's unbelievable. And, as you think about some of the players you've had that are one of the best players in college basketball that barely make it through a tryout in a WNBA.
Right.
I mean, it's just.
Yeah. And then you get to the top of it and then you start talking about the idea of, you know, I tell people it's like, and this kind of can maybe dovetail a little bit into this whole conversation about name, image, and likeness, because the whole thing is that I tell people what's different is that with women's basketball, women's sports, so for most women, like this is from an opportunity of access and recognition and being able to make resources off of actually their ability and skill and whatever. For a lot of women, this will be the most it'll ever be, especially if you're playing here like at a Florida State, because of what you said, limited jobs. Then also it's not like a ton of money. I mean, again, you know, you look at the disparity, unless you're like one of those, you know, rare air people like a Diana Taurasi and people like that. You know, are you making that type of money? So a question I probably ask coaches, kind of in transition, how important is this stuff? I know you're big on it. You talked about this whole thing of this NIL, I think NIL, right?
Yes.
How important is that for you? And what's kind of your thoughts as a coach? Cause you sit on both sides. You want to empower your players, but also, you know, on the other side of this, like this makes some unfair advantages for certain teams and for certain universities and things like that. So
yes and no. Okay. I sit on the side of the student athlete because so I've had events at my house and I'm going to hire a Florida State ensemble to come and play at my house. I'm going to pay them and they're students. So they got a chance to use their gift. So these guys have a chance to use their gift and the platform. You're a lot more valuable in a Florida State uniform than you are out of it at this point in your life.
Right.
And so women are maybe have more personality in some ways more appealing on social media than the men. So they've got that advantage. And you've got to figure out, okay, so how do you want to use that advantage? And that's one thing that for the last 6 months I have been studying, because Florida's first. July 1, you know, no state tax. How are we going to be ahead of the curve? And so we put up a website. We are educating our players. We're educating our recruits to make sure that they know that we are all for you in this. Unfortunately, we can't marry them with deals. Okay. Yeah. But you think about the disparity that there was at the NCAA tournament, and Sedona Prince gets on Instagram, starts talking about it. She's ready to make money right now. As soon as it goes open in Oregon, she's ready to make money. Yeah. 2 twins at Fresno State basketball court, did a little TikTok video, went viral. If it were legal to get paid at that point, those twins would have been making hundreds of thousands of dollars. So you just don't know. I think about Shaquilla Thomas. I think, what if she had had this opportunity? Yeah. And when she dunked in practice and a dude's going crazy, that might have been something that went viral. Could have been something that she was paid to do. So there are a lot of different ways. It's not just social media. It's, you know, being Adrian Crawford and putting together your own camps and your own clinics and your own private lessons. And there are a lot of regulations. You can't, when you use your name, image, likeness to get paid, you can't wear Florida State stuff, or you can, but you're going to pay mightily. Wow. But, you know, you look at Chris Paul. He's doing State Farm. Do you see him in his son's uniform? No. He's wearing red State Farm red because he doesn't want to pay the Suns. And I know you're jumping, but I think this, as a guy who is a coach's kid, been in college athletics all my life, the one thing I tell people all the time is this, and it gets people frustrated when I say this, and I'm thankful. It's not to diminish my Florida State education, but what I tell people, my Florida State education was not the most valuable thing for me. Access. That logo was the most valuable thing for me. At the end of the day, because of that, I get done playing. I come back to the city. People who were boosters here who just said, hey, because I played here, whenever I would go to an event, I always learn, man, you're always nice. Because, I mean, listen, those people who are there, that's right, they're the ones who own businesses, I heard that from Magic Johnson when I was a freshman. He literally sat, when I was playing the University of Tulsa, he told our whole team, hey,
when you guys did those boosters, make sure you get to know him. He told the story of how he took everyone out who sat in the front row of the Lakers game. In the summer, he would take those people out. And that's how he actually learned how to do business going there. And so he told us this story back in, it's like 1996. He's telling us a story. So I always did that. So when I got back, all of a sudden, these people were like, hey, I'm thinking about doing, nobody was doing basketball skill training. It wasn't the crazy world it is now. So I was like, I'm thinking about doing this. And they were willing to help. But because I played here, that gave me a platform. It gave me access to relationships of people who were willing to invest and to do things like that. That's allowed me and my family to be here, be members of this community. And I've been thankful to be successful because of the access. And so I think that when what I love about this new thing is like, it's going to give kids the ability, even while they're on campus, to use the access they have, because our whole thing is setting them up. And I think is also what I love about it, because we don't live in the industrial age anymore. We are living in the 21st century. And I always feel, and again, I can speak to this, I don't know how much coach speak, but I speak to this, the NCAA is always so reactionary throughout the years to do stuff. And I know they're trying to, but it's always like this, it's reactionary and everybody wants to freak out because I'm like, the internet's been here. Instagram's been what it is. All this stuff's happened. All of a sudden we're like, oh, we got to do something. I'm like, we all saw the world coming here, and now it's just the 21st century. And so I think these athletes should have the access to be able to, to use their skills and gifts like every other person does,
But doesn't it seem, it just seems like to me, and I think Adrian's right, that the NCAA has been, it's almost like they've been trying to hold the genie in the bottle. And then and it's not that, I know it's easy to portray, and a lot of the sports writers on Twitter will portray the NCAA as like these ogres. The NCAA really it's leaders from schools.
Yes.
It's university athletic directors and coaches and trying to figure out how to manage this. And it's a pretty untenable situation because once you start, because I think the Alston case was about like an iPad or something, right? Wasn't it? It was about educational tools that are beyond just what, but it's like, but the problem, I think the concern from the NCAA, what they would say is, well, once you open up that door, then where do you stop? How do you get the genie back in the bottle? So how tough is that? How challenging do you think that's going to be? I think people feel like that, like this door is going to be open and everything's going to be great, but how challenging is it going to be to get through this minefield?
Well, I'd take it back to when I was first coaching. We could call a player once a week. We could send them letters, and then here comes a cell phone. You're like, okay, you can still call them once a week, send them letters, no text messages.
Emails are okay though, right?
Emails are
okay, but not text messages.
That's right. And everybody was like, whoa, what if we opened it up and let us text?
That's crazy.
And then it was like, wait, okay, let's have unlimited calls. What? Unlimited calls? Are you kidding? Like, we're never going to get off the phone. It all levels out because we are dealing with a younger generation. This is all they've known. And so this to me, like, let it open it up, just don't try to put a lot of constraints because again, it will level itself out.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I wanted to mention about, access and Adrian, the point he made about a lot of players are not going to be more marketable than they are right now. But one of the things that I've seen, especially in women's sports, but really in all the non-high, revenue sports, is getting the fans to appreciate and to see what's going on in these teams. Because one thing that's always happened, like when you've had a run and you make the Elite Eight or something, you'll hear these people, FSU fans, be like, "Oh man, I love this team." Or softball goes to the World Series. "Oh, I love this team." But it's like they don't see it until that happens. How do you, and I know you've done things, you've tried to market your program, done a million things to do that. How do you think the schools are going to be able to help these players get that exposure that maybe they're not going to get from the traditional media? What
I don't think they are. Schools can't do that. Schools can't. The only thing that we can do right now is we provide a platform called Influencer that is supposed to teach them what it is that they need to do to raise their social media status. It provides them pictures and the like. But we also are going to provide some education, on how to do it. But I think it's more for life right now. I think it's if somebody's really interested in this and they want to start their own LLC, you're going to be the CEO of your own company. So we're going to teach you how to do that, and that'll help you later in life.
Yeah.
Same thing with taxes. Hey, are you gonna keep every receipt, or are you going to find a place that you can do this? And how does that affect your parents? And these are the things that I think is our job as a university to educate.
And that's really important. I think you say that because I think, as I'm wide open to open this thing up, I'm like, most people don't think through. Most people, you see on Twitter, like, I should open it up. I'm like, yeah. But what happens when they get hit with that tax bill? And they put things away, and like we're not like preparing them for like, you got to put money. Listen, you got to put this amount away, and da da da. So I do like what the universities are doing there, but I also think too. And again, this is just my opinion, and I don't, I would love you guys' thoughts. But the thing I find interesting about the NCAA in this whole situation is that the fact that like where they keep trying to put the genie in the bottle, but I'm like, where in the world do you work to where you work and you don't get paid for working? Like, I mean, if you really think about it, at the end of the day, people make money off of you. There's no, I don't care what anybody says, just whatever. And even if they do say that, like, they make money off of you. You know what I'm saying? And even if it's a non-revenue producing sport, you're still putting the brand out there. So let me tell you this. If it's a non-revenue producing sport or whatever, but all of a sudden they make a run, swimming, diving, whoever, the brand of that university is in front of eyeballs, and that's making money. And that's where, for me, I struggle sometimes. I've always struggled with NCAA because it operates. And again, it just operates separate from like any other type of like institution where there's no like, So help me out.
The insider view of that. And this is, I don't agree with how we've gotten here. The insider view of that is that's not what it was built for. It wasn't built to make money.
Right.
Okay. It was built to put some legislation in place so it was fair for all the sports. Well, then all of a sudden, here comes the big bucks.
Yeah.
But the big bucks really support all of those sports that are non-revenue. And so when we're not good in football, we don't have as much revenue.
Yeah.
And so what's going to happen if this is the fear?
Yeah.
What happens if football doesn't make as much money, or they start giving a share of the football revenue to football players? And it will be the end of a lot of sports at the college level that you've seen. So there are those other side notes that people don't really think about.
No, and that's really, and I'm glad you brought that up because again, for me, I look at it, and I think when I look at it's so crazy because the universities, I think there's this tension within the context of universities where, you got football's going to help create more. But then I think about, this NCAA bigger picture to where now you're looking at this bigger picture organization that does make a lot of money and does have that. And then you're like, okay, how is this actually trickling down? So on and so forth. So, and it's like, it ends up being we start making money, and I always, so I go back and forth all the time. I talk to coaches all the time because, there's some coaches who are like, you should like, even, I mean, I've had conversations with coaches, kids should make money doing this. And I'm like, and I literally looked at, it was a coach for a friend of mine. And I looked at him like, well, no one's telling you the money you make. Oh, well, no. You're coaching amateurs. I'm like, okay, well, then if that's the case, then you get an amateur salary.
Well, the NCAA, that's what you want to do. That's right. But the NCAA, 90% of their revenue is men's basketball, that tournament, period. And so it really, football's on its own.
Yeah.
And so, but that's supposed to then fund every other sport. And so those are the things that, but that what's out of control is coaches' salaries, the facilities, all of those things are just skyrocketing, and it makes it really hard to swallow that a player is out there doing what they're doing and not seeing any value to this.
Yeah.
Except their education, of course, and all of those things. It's just, if it were all, at a good level, it would be a little bit different.
And
story.
I think, and I want to, Brandon, you want to chime in, but I think this is the last thing I'll say. But I think what makes it so hard too is that no one wants to face the reality that education too is changing. That like education was like, I come up, everybody said to me, go to school. And it was because my parents they didn't have the opportunity. They were told by their parents because they didn't have the opportunity to do that. I would say go to school. It does this. Living now in the 21st century, like education is important if you're going very specifically for what you do, but it's not as important as it once was because of the opportunities in other places. Prime example, Bree sitting here who had an opportunity to go to school. She comes to me and was like, hey, I'm like, do you know what are you going to take that out? She's like, yes. Do you know what you're going to do? Well, I really don't know. I'm like, well, that's not the right move, right? To go take that out. To then now at 21 years of age, there's a consulting company I started that will make a lot of money this year. And she pretty much, as someone who does not have a college degree, is running the day in, day out of it because she had the intellect to do it and the hustle and all the stuff to do that. And so that's why I feel like sometimes people, well, you get your education. I'm like, well, the value used to be there. I think the world's going to change. And I think that's where I constantly am kind of arguing with people when it comes, because education is important, but it's not what it used to be. So I don't know. Those are my random thoughts.
Yeah. So that just made me think about the importance of developing athletes outside of athletics, obviously. And then a few weeks ago, we had Coach Stan Jones come in and speak to our staff. And we literally had like 5-6 pages of notes on just how they develop their boys outside of just playing and playing too, because that's important. So I'm interested in hearing what the strategy is for women's basketball for that.
Yeah, I could probably write the 5 pages too, because there's so much to it.
Yeah.
We talk about the fact I mentioned earlier that you're a person first. And so what does that mean? And right now it means when you're talking about basketball, you talk about things like nutrition and training and mental health and those types of things that we all provide, skill development. But really when you go out into the world, that's where we're talking about. So like, for instance, I went and I met with the first African-American athlete's sister at Florida State.
Wow.
Do you know who that is?
I do not know.
Fred Flowers.
Okay.
He coached, he played baseball. And his sister, Dobby Flowers, and Charlie Ward's wife, and I went to lunch. And the thing that was interesting to me, you talk about education. What kind of education are we getting? Are we getting an education that is broad enough based? Are we getting an education that is not racially biased? And how do we make that kind of change? So bringing that back to my student athletes and putting them in a position where we develop that character and that drive to say, what do I believe in? What do I stand for? Is so important, because they have a platform right now in order to, and everybody talks about building a brand. That is their brand.
Yeah.
What do you stand for?
Yep.
And so helping them to determine that is a big piece of it. I mean, there's wonderful things like going out and serving in the community. We always say, the Dead Sea is dead because all the tributaries flow in and none flow out. So if you're going to sit here and take and take and take and not learn how to give, you don't grow. And so those types of opportunities are things that we're going to do to help them, but it's relationship building. I said the relational value of what they bring to the court. It's the idea of Magic Johnson that you talked about. Yeah. Those are the things that are going to help them and benefit them outside of this. And just staying connected is so important.
I also think of the life things you've taught with in terms of the mission trips you've taken the players on and giving back and Samaritan's Feet and all the different projects you got. I mean, that's an empowering movement as well. You made that comment before about, in our society, a lot of times Black women being perceived as at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to power. But, being around some of your players, I mean, they are such powerful, strong people. Do they perceive that? Is that something that they perceive that's how they're perceived? What kind of conversations have you had in that area?
Well, we bring our recruits in and talk about who the players that are here are strong, powerful, beautiful women of character, period. And that's what we want to build. And, I would take the baton from you and say, okay, I don't want to screw up what you've done for 18 years in your daughter's life. And I want to take and I want to grow that. So the minute they get here, they know that's who they are. Now, the world may tell them a lot of different things, but we want to continue to renew their mind with that statement. I was so blessed when we had a recruit on campus, and here's Morgan Tolles, who played for me, and she is spitting that out to this recruit.
Yeah.
Here we're about being strong, powerful, beautiful women of character. And I thought that just came out. And she believes that. And we believe that about them. So I hope they believe it about themselves. They have been so much more oppressed though. And they know that, and, but they know that this is hopefully a launching pad for something.
And I think that, Coach, one of the things I love is that as we've been talking about this, it always goes back to, and that's why, as we even started, these questions just kind of come, we start talking. But I knew one of the places it's going to go is majority is going to stay in the fact that you talk about individuals, people, because everything in your program, I've been around, it's always about individuals and people who they're becoming. But in that, it's led to, I believe that's one of the reasons why it's led to success, because you've had to approach this completely different. You inherited, a team at the bottom of the barrel, and you've built that. So again, I want to just always tell people when I talk to people who give them their flowers, you know what I'm saying, while they still can smell on me, I really appreciate that so much about you, that you truly do live that out. You live out, hey, I'm about these players first. Even at times it may be a detriment, but you've been about their character, who they are as human beings, what's going to happen. And the basketball's been second. So I really, really appreciate that, about you. And so I guess the next thing I want to do, but I do want to now go into, because, we have so many different people who listen. And so you coach, and this is your craft, and this is what you do. So you took a sabbatical. Very few people get a chance like in life, like, hey, to take a break from their job, right? Mm-hmm. Now you did. What has you being able to, did you watch a lot of basketball? What has been now what have you learned? What has been some of the, like from a coaching standpoint, some things you've now seen, you're like, oh, maybe you learn more about yourself, more about, this is just who I am and I'm going to be this way. Like, what are some things you've learned being away from coaching from 1 year? Kind of like, you haven't been in the pool, you've been out of the pool. Now you're like coming back into it. What fresh eyes do you have?
Yeah. And first of all, it wasn't the sabbatical I would have chosen, not for just because it was my mom, but I couldn't go anywhere. I mean, you tell me the last time you stayed for months at a time at your parents' house. Yeah. I mean, that was since high school, right? So I learned a lot of things about myself that I learned from my parents at a young age. But I really can't talk a lot about the coaching change until I talk about the change that I went through.
Yeah.
And I realized, and I'm still realizing, I had very little self-awareness. I talked with a lot of different people. I've really researched this through the lens of the Enneagram, which has been fascinating.
What are you on the Enneagram, Coach?
What do you think?
Are you a 3?
I'm a 3.
Oh my God.
I know.
I'm in all your endeavors, I can imagine.
I hate being a 3 too. Absolutely hate it. Yes. And so learning about that and learning how to be present it's changed me.
Wow.
The test is, will this profession rub me again so hard that it changes me back? And I did not even, I've heard this. I was afraid of it, but I thought I always fought it hard enough. My identity was in being a basketball coach. And I hate that because I'm not going to be a basketball coach forever. So who was I? Who am I apart from this?
Wow.
And I started to really understand that and continue to want to learn about that. And then I was like, when did I change? Where did that shift occur? And I was talking to you, Adrian, recently about an author that writes about churches whose leaders fail.
Yeah.
And why is that? And this gentleman pointed to leadership and the study of leadership. Now, you and I, that was big.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember I brought pastors in and we would talk leadership. Well, and even going to the Global Leadership Summit, and all of a sudden they started bringing in secular leaders that were highly successful. We can learn something from that. Duh. Yeah. But you know what I learned is I learned a different definition of success. And it was putting butts in the seats. It was having the media attention, and for the players' sake, it was all for the players' sake or the university's sake or the recruiting sake. Yeah. Yes. And I don't believe that anymore. I mean, I only came back here if I could recruit, coach, and build relationships. I said, Brooke, you got to do that stuff last year. You didn't have to do any of the other stuff. It was COVID. You didn't have to go recruiting and flying around and doing these. You learned that this year. And let me go back to what I know is the most important instead of dealing with what's urgent.
Wow.
So that's been big.
And let me ask you this then, because you say that as far as I'm more than a coach. So I kind of want to kind of press down on that because that's really important, because one of the things I talk a ton about to people, I work with executives and people. And one of the things I talk about is this idea of authenticity, right? And I always compare it to self-awareness and resilience to remain self-aware. It's it's a different, but then you have the skill set emotionally to actually remain that, because of what you said, then you start drifting, man. Okay. That's right. You look, it's great to say, man, I'm not I don't care who sits in the seats until you're in the game. You're like, man, enough people in these seats, right? That's and then to remain that way. But I always tell people your calling and purpose, I kind of compare content and containers, right? Your content, it doesn't matter what container. Being a coach is a container, right? Being a friend is a container. Being a daughter is a container. But the content of who you are. So I guess I want to ask you that. What do you feel like is the content of you? What do you feel like you say, I bring as a coach? But then when I jump into, because I know there's business endeavors you do, I do this. What do you feel like that really is? Because I really feel like that's your purpose. I would love for you to unpack that a little bit more as you become more self-aware, because I think it's really helpful for a lot of people.
I read a book called The Second Mountain while I was out this past year. David Brooks wrote it. And he talks about the first mountain as being this climb that we all need to take to figure out, what do we want to do? Who do we want to be with? How far do we want to go? And you climb to the top of that mountain. And then you get to the top and you're like, well, okay, I'm a container. It's your container. I mean, I am a basketball coach. I have been this. I am in this family. I wish I could say I am married to such and such. But don't got that guy yet. So, keep him coming. But that's where, you take that look and you're like, this isn't enough. And so you have to almost deconstruct what you have built. And then you've got to go on the second mountain. Okay. And that second mountain, the first mountain is the whole dream of success.
What you think you want.
What you think you want. What's the American dream though? It's and the of happiness. Come on. Yes.
Life, liberty,
yes. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's it. And then but the second mountain is about joy. And it's about what's really in you. And what is that? And what kind of joy, what brings you joy? And what can you do? You've got a great container, Now let's fill the container. So you ask, what is that? I'm just starting to fill the container.
Wow.
It's kind of mind-blowing though, because as Adrian said, you have achieved at the highest levels of your sport. So that is how we view you. We view you as Sue Semrau, women's basketball coach, builder of a program, ace recruiter, developer of talent. And then, but if you're going to change your recipe, that's got to be a little scary, because
no, it means not all what you said doesn't mean one thing. And I always early on, I felt like, I remember when the first ACC Coach of the Year award, do you remember what happened that year? I had a player die. I had a player get pregnant. We were playing with very few players. And then the coach of the year comes and you're like, get that off of me. I didn't do that, And so, but then I started to kind of lose that a little. And then the expectation was to do what you're saying. And now the expectation is to live in the day. And I want to feel very joyful about that and what happens that day. Because all that other stuff, it makes me cringe. I mean, it's hard. I don't want that. I mean, I want that picture of Bobby Bowden and I had nothing to do with us being coaches. It was us being friends and us being colleagues that cared about each other. And those are the things that really matter.
Yeah. And I think it's always this paradox you walk into, because I agree with you where you get to where you thought you're going to go. And I was always on that, like, I always thought, like, hey, when I get to a certain level, like, financially, then you get there and you're just like, and it is, you're like, oh yeah, this doesn't matter. But then you get there and you're like, oh, but here's the next mountain to go climb. Or, hey, if you get this level of success, then, and you never, and it's what coach said, like, you just never feel satisfied. You know what I mean? Like, I started a consulting company here and it's like, hey, everybody's talking about these problems with diversity, equity, inclusion. And so I'm like, all right, so we get into it. And I've helped people throughout the years, helping here and there. And all of a sudden, like, as soon as we launch it, like my first time we launched it effective as a company, it's a Fortune 500 company. And like most people never get this. And when I get it, I found myself like learning even like, okay, I'm going to live in the moment because I get a chance to actually help shape a corporation. Now it's like the other ones, their culture, really what we talk about, but it's so easy to just like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? And it's really, but I tell you, it is so seductive to just chase that stuff, because all of a sudden you're like, you feel a sense of something. And then it's the American way, right? It's the American dream, man. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, work hard, meritocracy, all this stuff. And you get there and you're like, and then what really messes you up, and he's like, I just come to realize that there's always somebody better.
Yes.
That's what messes me up when I'm like this. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm pretty good. And then all you do is flip on your phone. Like, and you're just like, gosh, I mean, every time, one of my other things, being a preacher communicator, every time I flip on, you know what? That was really good. I'll just happen to stumble on YouTube. I'm like, I hear like TD Jakes, right? And I'm just like, yeah, man, this dude, I'm like, yo, man, it's like watching like Michael Jordan. I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna, what am I doing? I'm like, I quit. Like somebody else go do this, right? Because there's always someone better. But I really love that approach and appreciate that approach about how you're taking it, Coach, because it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, because it's so hard. But, I think over knowing you over the years, if anybody can do it, because that's how it started. Right. That's ultimately how, over the years when we started, it was always like, you're like, I really don't, this stuff. And it was interesting when you didn't care about it, it came, and then it's like you said, you just kind of keep propping it up and stuff like that. And so I think the next thing I would ask is like, how do you feel like, how's it been now that you've come back, right? You turned it over to Brooke. Now you've come back and you're sitting in that chair. How has that been? Because, it's like, you go from, hey, I'm the CEO, I take a break, to now I'm coming back in that seat. We see it all the time in corporations where all of a sudden, CEOs may come back in their company. How has that been with you and her? And how are you walking through that? Cause, she goes in and she's leading and she was doing this, to then now you're back and you guys have such a great relationship. So how's that been?
She's the CEO now.
Oh, okay. And
I'm the coach.
So explain. What does that mean?
Well, I want her to make the decisions. I trust her to make the decision about whether we get the blinds fixed or not in the gym, because we get blinded all the time. We can't close them. So are we going to raise the money to do this? I mean, it's all these things that I used to have to think about. And so she is pretty much everybody else's boss, just like she was last year. And her and Dave Plettle are my right and left hand. But they've said, you need to do what you're best at. And so I've been able to re-enter the atmosphere, slowly, and build relationships again with the people I need to build relationships. I have my players. Yeah. And that's been huge for me. The self-awareness piece for me was big, but then when I came back, I tell you, Brooke and Dave really put me in my place about some things that I thought were just being a really good leader, that it wasn't being a good leader. Wow. Yeah. So I can I can
do that, but I want you to speak to because like Dave Plettle, because here's the reason why is because this has been your approach. Dave Plettle is your strength coach, but he's way more, and he's always been way more. So like, explain that, because most people, you know what I mean? Because when they see, again, you'll see Dave, saying good looking, kind of white Filipino dude at the end of the bench, Jack, who sits at the end of the bench. But Dave has been with you for a long period of time. Dave was my strength coach. He was familiar with you. Dave's one of my closest friends. But I've always known that relationship. But now there's kind of been this thing where Dave's a guy. I always tell people, I always joke with Dave. I'm like, dude, you're Geppetto. Like, you're the dude behind the wheel, just like, dance. Dance. Like, he's over there like a puppet and dance for me.
That's so
like,
true.
He does it for me. I'm like, go walk away from Dave. I'm like, this is Dave's idea. He makes me look good, but it's really his idea. So like, why would, dude, you're taking a guy who's a strength coach, and now, literally he is he helps you shape this program. Kind of talk a little bit about that.
Just wisdom on steroids.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
He has been in so many different situations, and he has such a sharp mind that he refers back to. He is somebody who, I just call him my rock. Yeah. He is just the rock of the program. He's somebody that communicates to the players when I don't. He communicates my heart. He understands who I am and what I meant by saying something, and he can go behind me. Same thing with our staff. He is that the coach whisperer or something.
He really is.
He's unbelievable. He listens. He helps me to know, to have feel, I think. And so many coaches don't have feel. I've had people on my staff that they might have known a lot, but didn't know when to put it in. And I think he develops that in our staff as well.
Wow. It's amazing.
Yeah.
When one of the things I thought was interesting, not surprising, but towards the end of, Coach Wyckoff's tenure as the interim head coach, had some nice wins and some big moments. And I know some of the media reached out to you to talk about her and talk about that. I think you declined to talk. You wanted it to be about, it was her team and her year. How important was it to watch, but not meddle and get you involved?
Well, I wanted her to develop her own philosophy, but so much of it is the same. We have the same philosophy, so put some spice in it.
Yeah.
And figure that out. I know in the NCAA tournament, ACC tournament, they asked me if I would go be on the phone as a commentator. No, I'm not going to. And this is what Brooke's thinking right now. That's not, no, it's not about me. It's about her. And even I think Steve Stone, our sports information director, does a great job now of continuing to promote the great work she's doing with Moms in Coaching, which is a tremendous, she has her own podcast, it's really neat the way that all happened, but she's so much more. And putting her in that spotlight, and just what a gift for her to stay another year with us, to really learn it and to really be ready. I'm just thankful.
Yeah. I think the last thing I want to ask, and this is kind of a little bit off, but if you're willing to do this, if you were starting all over again, okay, and all the players you've coached, and you could take 5 to start your program, what 5 would you take?
Now that's not fair.
I'm sitting here thinking, she's not going to do that.
Because I love them all. It's going to get back to them. She didn't pick me.
But this, you love them all. But listen, it's like this. But it's a fair question, because I tell people all the time, like, I love all my children, but I would never ever leave Jalen. Like, the inheritance of my money, I would never leave it to Jalen, ever. Like that's not, I'm like, I love him. That doesn't mean he wasn't great, but I would never, it's going to Brooklyn. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's where I'm going to probably leave it. So I think,
but that's a different question.
No, okay. I think, Coach, you should like a 5 or 1 or something of saying, or maybe, I don't know, because I really want to know, because you've coached really good players, and it's like, you start like, man, and it doesn't have to be like people who were so talented.
Come on, Mild, what are you saying?
One thing I was going to say is, I'm trying to help him out here, is
here
like,
we go.
It's what's hard, I think, to make those decisions or to judge sometimes is because sometimes different players are what different teams need. right? So like a player, a great leader as a player sometimes will fill whatever need that team has.
You hear that, Adrian?
So
listen, all right, fine. I'm gonna put my top 5. So she want to do my top 5. One, my top 5 is this: Renika Hodges.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Let's just talk
Oh,
about
yeah.
No.
Yes.
Listen, Renika Hodges, a stone cold. Listen, like
baddest woman on the planet.
a killer. Just a full, like
Now you guys know what she's doing right now.
Is she
I
coaching?
thought she was still in the league.
Okay, she retired from playing.
Yep.
And she coached at Old Dominion last year.
Good for her.
And guess where she is now? She is with my first player who's gone Division I head coach is her assistant, Gunniot Adadunton.
No kidding.
Really?
Yeah. They are together building something.
That's incredible.
First of all, that Gunniot getting that job is amazing.
Amazing, yeah.
But Renika, it's funny how different now the transfer world is just the transfer world. Everything's transfer portal. Players come and go with the wind, it seems like. But Renika was one of the first ones I remember, especially a high profile coming from LSU to a Florida State. And could you have asked for anything more?
And think about it, guys. She played 1 year.
Yeah.
And you brought her up first.
First person.
I mean, that is impact. And in fact, when we went to LSU in 2019, Ronika came to the game. I had her talk to my team, and she was spot on. I said, "This is the kind of leader that we want to be."
Because at the end of the day, when I watch, it's like she's one of the people. You know what it is? It reminds me of like how Tony Douglas
I knew you were
was.
going to say Tony Douglas.
Because like they just will you to win.
Yes.
Like at the end of the day, it's like I don't care what it's going to take. Like I'm gonna let all y'all do this, but when it comes go time,
yes.
I got to fight somebody. I got to break somebody's arm, get this ball. Like we're gonna do whatever it takes to win. And I felt like she did, she gave a lot of players, she gave a lot of players confidence and courage.
The whole team was tough. The whole team was tougher.
It's just like you just
whole team.
Yeah, hold it.
Absolutely.
So I would say her. I definitely would say Brooke. Brooke.
Yes.
I was here when Brooke was here, and I would watch Brooke play, and I'm like. And I used to love going to watch Brooke play.
Right, Adrian's going to give you his top 5.
I like that.
She won't give me her top 5, so I'm going to see what she agrees with. I would say that. I would say Scent. I love Scent.
Yes.
Like I think for me, it's just because she just holds such a dear place in my heart. Scent holds a dear place in my heart.
Well, and she's probably the longest kid we've ever had, and she would be one of the funniest.
Yes.
And you're just like, how do you be that good and that funny and that sensitive?
But that's where the marketable part you talk about is a kid like that who's so dominant as a shot blocker and a player inside, but also just so beautiful and vivacious and would be so marketable.
Yes. So true.
So then here's my 4th. So we got to play zone. This group fully zone. We could not play man to man. 4 would be Natasha Howard.
Oh yeah.
I mean, just on just sheer.
Oh yeah.
Just
now
like
we could play man, and she'd cover everybody.
Well, she could. Well, my point, you could, but when you switch, here's my point. You're gonna have to switch her and Scent.
Yeah.
And it's about to be go time for whoever Scent's guarding.
Yeah, that's right.
It's gonna be go time when I for whoever Scent's guard. But I think that this is the hard one. So let me see if you can help me. Maybe you give me 3 or 4. Who will we? I mean, who would be the point if we had to put a point out there? I mean, I think about Angel Gray and her ability to some of the stuff she could do.
Mm-hmm.
I think about Letty. I think about
Courtney Ward.
Oh my gosh, Courtney Ward. I mean,
Shantae Williams put us on her back and took us to the Sweet 16. Hey, and can we talk full circle on that one?
Yeah.
Her son was playing at Leonard's team camp.
Serious?
Yes.
I remember
Wow.
back in the day.
Thank you.
Really?
Yes. He was playing in high school. That's the full circle right there.
Gosh, yeah. Let me say, she was the first, she was the first, really, because again, we're a female athlete that came in with a level of swag, and I would watch her play. I'm like, she was coming off pick and rolls. And I don't want to career, but it's true. But she was coming off pick and rolls. This is before, it's become more
Don't say
more,
like a dude. Don't even do it.
Well, here's the reason why I'm going to say that. I'm going to say more like this because unfortunately, it was the fact that now there's more access for women's basketball players to get that type of training.
True.
You know what I'm saying? Versus you should be like this, but now but she was coming off a pick and roll. It looked like she trained with pros.
I just remember thinking, man, what did some high school kid in Jacksonville had to guard her last year? What?
Yeah. So she was good. So is there anybody else I missed that you would potentially throw in there?
I throw them all. And the thing that blows my mind is the ones who were the 1 year wonders like Leo Rodriguez.
I was just about to say, listen, one of my favorite humans on the planet.
And is going to be in the Olympics again this year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just unbelievable.
It's funny, like you look at Leo, and she's a prime example of something talking about building this program where you go and you're like 3 years, really nothing. And you're like, man, she can't really guard anybody. She wasn't confident enough. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, I feel like it was like the basketball gods just like sprinkled dust. It's like everything that was there just unlocked. But what she bought into, you talked about earlier, self-awareness, whatever. She finally just bought into who she was.
Yes.
She could shoot the ball. She had a great IQ, and she figured out how to be efficient defensively.
Yes.
Even with her. And then she just kept building it. But the one thing I loved about her, she didn't quit.
No.
She could have went back over to Europe, started playing professionally, but she just stuck with it. She's a prime example. In that 1 year, and now you look at, I think the things she learned here during that time has allowed her to have this, probably one of the longest careers of any player that's ever left here professionally.
I'm sitting here thinking, Sue's probably, I'm going through my mind, and I don't know half the play, but Ivy and Brittany and,
oh my God,
just so many ice and so many great players have come through the program that it's I don't know how you could pick.
Thank you.
20 or 25. So
I'm just saying, I'm trying to make it spicy for the podcast.
We got Coach Semrau's top 5.
Hey, we got top 5. There's a lot of y'all left off. just start adding people. Add Britt Brown. Like you start whoever it is, start adding people. But Coach, hey, we really appreciate you again. Taking the time, spending here doing this, and again, I don't know how long you're going to keep doing this thing for. I know you probably going to take us like probably a year by year type of thing. But again, I really appreciate what you've done for women's athletics. I will tell you this as a father of two, of two Black women. The fact of watching, see what you do and empowering Black women is a huge thing for me because I know it's very genuine for you to see empowerment, to put equity into their hands. That's the big thing for me. It's not just you're trying to build a diverse team. You literally actually put power. I tell people all the time, the issue in today's world, what 2020 was all about, was about power.
That's right.
It was about actually saying, no, people just don't want, only marches and walks and things like that. They actually want power because power changes systems and culture. And I actually watch you not only like just, hey, we're just giving them things, but no, like they do, but you're actually giving them access to take a step forward. And so I think generations, you look at generations are changing because you stepped in and say, hey, I want to help, and not out of some place of any type of white guilt, but just like, no, this is just the right human thing to do. That's right. And so it's just the right human thing to do. So I really appreciate that. And we wish you nothing but the best. And we appreciate you taking time today.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Coach.
All right, guys. Well, until next time, we'll be back with you soon on the Black and Mild.